Okay, we're on.
Hello. Hello, everyone. May I start it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hello. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, welcome everyone to join the 13th Polish-Ukrainian Forum, which is our long-term cooperation project between the International Renaissance Foundation, Ukraine, and the Batory Foundation. This is a very intense, dramatic, and very correct time to come back to our discussion. Usually, we try to be providers of very timely exchange of views and expertise between Polish and Ukrainian experts and policymakers. And I hope this day discussion will also be a part of this good endeavor. So thank you everyone who joined. I look forward for the productive discussion, and thank you Batory Foundation for organizing this event, for co-organizing. And I see the program, and I hope there will be a good discussion today. So now I just ask Piotr to take the floor to continue our conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, Alexander, for this kind introduction and opening words. I will have the pleasure to chair this discussion. My name is Piotr Buras, and I'm the head of the ECFR's European Council on Foreign Relations Warsaw office, and partner of this Stefan Batory Foundation, which is organizing this forum together with the Renaissance Foundation. We have almost 2 hours for our discussion on an extremely timely and important topic. I think the title of our panel could sound familiar to many of you. Time for a new opening is something we probably have heard a number of times when it comes to the relations of the European Union and Ukraine. We planned this event ahead of the Eastern Partnership Summit, which is a yearly event, which is always a very good occasion to reflect on the state of affairs in the relations between the European Union and its Eastern partners, and in this case, with Ukraine in particular. And I think this is, of course, this question of a new opening is always kind of timely, because I think we have a situation now with the Eastern Partnership, which is hailed as a successful project of the European Union, especially in Poland, which was an initiator of this project. And we indeed have, over the last years, a number of important steps taken by both sides, and especially the association agreements, which have been in place already for a couple of years and have been implemented. But at the same time, I think it would be fair to say that we may have all the impression that these relations between the EU and Eastern partners, or regardless of this progress achieved in the last years, regardless of the relevance of those relations for both sides, regardless of the geopolitical ambitions defined by the European Commission recently, they kind of are lacking an energy. I mean, and lacking a very clear perspective where we are heading to. And this lack of a clear perspective, I think, is probably a particular problem for the Eastern partners. And today we will discuss it with our Ukrainian friends. And I think this is this lack of energy is probably something which will be at the center of our discussion today, because we are, I don't know if we are looking for more for a new opening really, but perhaps we are looking for a new energy, or for more energy for this cooperation, and for some light in the tunnel when it comes to the next steps which could be taken by both sides. And but of course we are, as Alexander mentioned, we are entering this discussion at a very particular moment, and I think we cannot ignore this fact at all. In this debate, we are entering the discussion at the moment where there is an escalation of military buildup on the Russian side of the Ukrainian borders. There is a very dramatic discussion also within NATO and in the transatlantic community, what could be an inadequate reaction to that, and what actually we are heading for in this conflict. And I think it will be good if we perhaps start this conversation today with a very brief attempt to sum up what's happening at the moment and what is the current state of affairs. But before we come to that, I would like to introduce our great speakers. We have really a wonderful panel, and let me start with our Ukrainian colleagues, Ukrainian friends who are joining this discussion. I will start with Veronyka Movchan, who is the academic director of the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, a renowned think tank in Kiev, dealing with especially economic research, social issues, and Veronica is a great expert, especially on all issues related to the economic ties between the European Union and Ukraine, specialist on association agreement, and we will hear more from her insights during our discussion. Then with us is also Dmytro Shulga, who is European Program Initiative Director at the International Renaissance Foundation in Kiev, the partner institution today, who is also an EU specialist and an expert for EU-Ukrainian relations. I'm very much looking forward to his introductory remarks in a couple of minutes. We will also have Olena Pavlenko, an energy expert, president of the Dixi group, a Kiev-based think tank specialized in all matters related to energy transformation. She will join us a little bit later. Then we have also two colleagues, so to say, from the EU side, if we may put it so. We have Kai-Olaf from the Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, a renowned German think tank in Berlin. Kai is expert for Central Eastern Europe, but covering also in great depth also the relations of the EU with Ukraine, and has been analyzing also the Polish Eastern policy, and of course the issues related to the Eastern Partnership. And last but not least, I'm very pleased to welcome also Wojciech Przybylski, the director of Visegrad Insight and representing also Publica, specialist in Central Eastern Europe. But Visegrad Insight has authored a number of interesting publications on the future of the Eastern Partnership, including one recent publication from the spring this year, outlining several scenarios for the future of the Eastern Partnership. And I think Wojciech will contribute to the discussion a great deal from this perspective. So now I will stop here and would like to give the floor to Dmytro Shulga, whom we asked to outline a little bit the current state of affairs between Ukraine and the European Union. I think we talk a lot about the Eastern Partnership when it comes to the EU policy towards Ukraine and towards our Eastern partners, but sometimes I have the feeling that perhaps the Eastern Partnership is not really what our Eastern partners are most interested in. Perhaps this is more the question of concrete implementation of the association agreement and the economic importance of that, and also perhaps the potential of deepening them. So I would like to hear from Dmytro what this current state of cooperation is, how it is perceived in Ukraine, what are the expectations, what is the role of the Eastern Partnership, and what are the possible next steps which could be undertaken beyond the upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit. So Dmytro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Piotr. First, I would like to ask if it's all correct with my voice, if you hear me, right? The translators are there. Okay, good. Thank you again. And well, maybe I will start by, because I mean, the whole story is already quite a long story of Ukraine's European integration. So maybe I will need to remind, to come back to some of the milestones. I would like to, first of all, to remind the year 2004, the accession of Poland and other Central European states to European Union, and launch of the European neighborhood policy, with some slogans of everything but institutions, and so on and so on. And at the same time, in the same year, Democratic Orange Revolution happened. And following that revolution, the European Union offered Ukraine an additional package, which consisted also of the proposal of the offer to launch talks on a new enhanced agreement, as it was called, and a free trade area. New enhanced agreement meaning to substitute the old style partnership and cooperation agreement signed in the 90s. So in 2007, we started negotiations on this new enhanced agreement. In 2008, negotiations on the free trade area also were started, and they actually eventually combined the two tracks. So, and it was decided to have the proper name of the agreement will be association agreement. So eventually, we know all the saga about signing association agreement to 2013-14. But before that, in 2009, during the negotiations with Ukraine, the European Union also decided to offer to other countries in the region, to the Eastern partners, to the other partners covered by European neighborhood policy in Eastern Europe, the same offer basically. So Eastern Partnership Summit in Prague, 2009, offered all the 6 countries the opportunity to have political association and economic integration with the EU, basically association agreement and DCFTA. The thing which was already negotiated with Ukraine. So for Ukraine, frankly speaking, Eastern Partnership, launch of the Eastern Partnership for bilateral relations with Ukraine provided a little added value. It just extended what was already negotiated with Ukraine to other countries. Other countries, by the way, we see that for the time being, I think it's pretty clear that only 2 of the countries accepted, apart from Ukraine, accepted this offer, Moldova and Georgia. So we now have in the Eastern Partnership very clear situation, very clear division on those countries who took on this offer of the European Union of political association and economic integration, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, the trio, and all the 3 other countries who, for various reasons, and we all also know their own individual stories, did not accept this offer. And now we see that basically the discussion about this differentiation in the Eastern Partnership, basically it's about accepting the reality and recognizing that this is a reality on the ground. And when I hear that from many EU member states that we need to preserve inclusivity of this Eastern Partnership, I, of course, Of course, I think we will. All of us would be happy if Belarus, if Armenia, if Azerbaijan would follow the suit and would follow our way. But so far they don't, and we need to show them the light in the tunnel, so to say. We need to show them the way. So if European Union is failing to recognize basically that we need special treatment for the three countries, it means that actually it doesn't help the other three to reconsider their approach. I think it doesn't send encouraging message to Belarus whatsoever, but it does send a discouraging message to Ukraine if it is not recognized that it needs to be treated differently within the Eastern Partnership framework. And but coming back to the association agreement and actually the whole saga of signing and ratifying it. So eventually, the whole story of concluding it finalized in 2017. And in the same year, 2017, we have had the visa-free travel, which was of absolutely huge political importance and clear importance for the people, for the citizens. And then actually the question arose and has arisen: what next? Basically, what next after these key deliverables we have? I mean, we have gone through very difficult story, but finally we have it done. So we have done the conclusion of the association agreement and ratification of it, and the visa-free travel is in place. So what next? This question was discussed by experts and politicians. A milestone here was Petro Poroshenko's suggestion, by that time president of Ukraine, to have so-called 5 unions between Ukraine and the European Union, including the customs union, including common aviation space and digital single market, association with the Schengen area, and energy union. And he presented this idea as a sort of something going beyond the association agreement, so that but in practice it was a full-fledged sectoral integration to the EU's to the EU single market. And then after, so to say, mild reaction, kind of not really very positive reaction from the European Union, Ukraine government quickly changed its approach, and basically it just read more carefully the content of the association agreement, and found that very many, or if not all, or almost all of those issues which Petro Poroshenko initially was speaking about, could be reached within the association agreement. So we have actually in the Ukrainian EU association agreement and DCFTA, specifically in the DCFTA chapter, quite a lot of things about sectoral integration, and I think Veronyka Movchan will be speaking in more detail about them. Actually, by the way, Ukrainian association agreement is more deep in that sense compared to Moldovan and Georgian association agreement, but it's another matter. So what we have now is really concentration from Ukrainian point of view, concentration on implementing the association agreement, understanding that association agreement is not just homework for Ukraine, that this is a bilateral one, and there's a obligation, there's commitment from the EU side. And what exactly is it is basically to, well, first of all, there's of course trade liberalization in the classical sense of tariffs reduction, but also there's a quite substantial portion of these commitments on sectoral integration, meaning that if Ukraine implements its homework on approximating legislation, then it gets this or that opening of the market of the European Union to the full extent possible, up to the level of what the current member states enjoy in the single market. So I think Veronika will explain more about it, but actually this is the core of, as I see now, as I observed now, the discussions on the bilateral level between Ukraine and Ukrainian government and the European Commission. And it is problematic, of course, as many such issues might be technical, but actually some of them from time to time tend to be political as well. And what is also interesting is that this year, the process of revision or how it's called, reviewing or updating the association agreement has started. And not to, I would like to mention this because it sometimes it's kind of not clear and speculate. Some people tend to speculate about it. So actually, this there is the possibility, or actually even not possibility, but necessity for review to review the level of achievement of the objectives of the agreement, implying that there must be some correction in the content of the agreement as well, is prescribed by this association agreement itself. So in the text of the agreement, there is a provision that after 5 years, the sides need to analyze what has been achieved and then probably to correct something if needed. So this process has started now, and it doesn't really cover the main text of the agreement, but as I understand it, is focusing now on the annexes to the agreement, because it is more easy, basically, because it doesn't require ratification by member states. But at the same time, it is really important because very many technical, but as I say, politically sometimes really important details are actually covered in the annexes to the agreement. So now this process has started, and I think this is the major bilateral relations between Ukraine and the European Union for the next, I don't know, couple of years probably. And while doing this pragmatic approach, focusing on sectoral integration, we understand that we need to be pragmatic because we need to approximate and we need to integrate as much as possible within the current framework. But of course, we do not forget our strategic aim. This is full-fledged membership in the European Union. And here, I think that we, both in the pragmatic sense of implementing an association agreement, of conducting dialogue also with the European institutions on these pragmatic things, we need to have help by those member states who support our European choice, like Poland, and especially in those issues of strategic importance, of the strategic dialogue about our future membership aspirations. We would like to have on board with us our friends from Poland and other Central European countries who would be able to convince those member states who are not yet convinced that Ukraine and probably other trio countries should be offered membership perspective in some not really distant future. So I think this is more or less where we are. We are pragmatic. We are focusing on implementing association agreement. We understand that we can have many clear benefits from it, but at the same time, we don't forget our strategic ambitions, and we would like to cooperate with our friends inside the European Union to advocate those who are still hesitant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dmytro, for this very interesting, while brief presentation of the current state of affairs. Very useful, and I think you made the point very clear that we are at the moment at the stage of basically implementation of the association agreement, and this is a long and not very easy process, but it's bringing Ukraine closer to the European Union by means of facts. But at the same time, the lack of this political perspective, European perspective, membership perspective, is something which overshadows this political relations. And then I would like to turn to Veronyka Movchan for a more in-depth, as I understand, analysis of this economic side of the relationship between the European Union and Ukraine, because I think this is important to understand the current developments, also because I think this sectoral integration is a buzzword we hear very often in the debate. That this is the energy we are looking for is perhaps a little bit there, so that we can pursue more advanced sectoral integration, which is something between lifting or trade liberalization and full integration into the European market. So if you could shed a little bit more light on what is actually behind it, and what is possible, what is likely to happen, what is already happening, and what is the ultimate ambition of Ukraine in that regard, that would be, I think, extremely interesting and very helpful. So please, Veronyka, the floor is yours.
Piotr, thank you very much. Dear friends, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to be here today and to speak on this very important topic, and actually target in movements, because everything is changing and better, which is great. Basically, what is the goal? The goal that is stipulated in the association agreement is the economic integration of Ukraine in the EU internal market. And we saw the confirmation of this goal in the joint statement of EU-Ukraine summit that was held in October this year. And I think we have some parallel things. Basically, we have the idea of the goal of European integration, full-fledged membership in the future, but economically now we have more clear-cut, tangible idea of integrating in the EU market. And the existing framework partially helps us, but not sufficiently. What do we have? We have, first of all, the association agreement DCFTA. It's a reduction of classical free trade reduction or elimination, basically, most of import duties. And we already saw that as the reflection of this liberalization in trade with the European Union that reached high levels, not only in terms of like share of Ukraine's trade that can be attributed to most of the Russian market, but also as in nominal, in real terms, and also in terms of diversification of products and the composition of the exports with a growing share of processed products and reduced share of raw materials. Currently, raw materials account about 25-27% of total exports. So basically, if somebody says you that Ukraine exports to you raw materials, no, that's wrong. It's not true. But what we see is this, first of all, this effect of classical import duty removal, plus effect of harmonization of standards that already occurred in the country, although it's not mutually recognized. So you did not say, yes, the standards are the same, and allow entering the European market without additional certification. And this is the part of this sectoral integration, the second step. Then we are working on getting deep integration through Ukrainian harmonization of norms and institutions and European verification of this process. We did a big study funded by the International Renaissance Foundation on this. It's actually the methodology was developed before in the Synergy project, also run by International Renaissance Foundation and Dmytro, basically. That was largely his methodology. Then we followed and expanded, and we studied 15 sectors of association agreement that allow this deep integration in the if-then mode. Ukraine does its part, and jointly with the EU verify that everything is correct. And jointly with the EU, the essential part here is one of the things that you should do, and we really highlight that, because if Ukraine is left alone in doing that process, it has happened over the past years, then first there is a delay with verification, and second, if Ukraine did something wrong at the first step, then you have to return to the beginning, do another round of legal adjustment, and then another round of institutional adjustment, and it takes years and years. And while the European legislation is not the stone head, it's changing. So it's a moving target. And if you're running slow, you're not even staying in the same place. You're lagging behind. But what has been achieved? Despite all these difficulties, some things have been already achieved, and much more are coming in the next 2 years. And I will be happy to share the link to the study and to the presentation, which I was not able to show, but it doesn't matter. You'll be able to check it, and I hope it can be sent around for all interested people. Basically, Ukraine have already recognition of equivalence for seed, which is small piece, but still important piece for agriculture. We already have gas market integration. I hope Olena will tell more about that. And we have a common aviation area recently signed agreement. But that's all. We are waiting for ACA agreement on conformity assessment and acceptance of industrial products. It is Ukrainian very nicely called industrial visa-free, and frankly, I agree that it's a good explanation, because it means that the manufacturing good can be shipped without additional certification, so without additional visa. Customs are coming, common transit system, mutual recognition of authorized economic operators. A lot is cooking up in digital sector with mutual recognition of electronic trust services, and we actually expect for internal market treatment for telecom. Financial services is much more difficult, but that's also sometimes often show up in internal market treatment. We expect public procurement mutual opening. So there are spheres where we will have things that will soon, hope sooner and later, then that will allow Ukraine much deeper integration with the EU and much deeper links. And if we check compared to the other Eastern Partnership countries, the study that we presented a couple of days ago, Eastern Partnership Index, showed that Ukraine in trade approximation is ahead of its peers in Moldova and Georgia, and definitely ahead of other countries of Eastern Partnership, which is non-surprising. But the existing framework of association agreement is not sufficient, even for like the intermediate goal of economic integration. Why? Because life is changing. European Union has digital single market that emerged after the negotiations were completed. And Ukraine has already pushing hard, and there are some positive movements about Ukraine integrating in this market. There is transport union, and transport is an extremely important issue because association agreement actually quite vague on that. We have internal market treatment for international maritime transportation, but road, rail, and domestic inland waterways are outside. It's just said that some additional agreement may be signed. And yeah, talking to Polish people, we all know that the issue of road transportation is very hot in relations between Ukraine and Poland because it's bilateral permits, and Ukraine complains that it's not sufficient. The resolution of that might come. We have transport union of European Union and Balkans, but it might solve issues for rail and rivers, but not roads. So further solutions should be found. We have also energy union. I guess I didn't mention that, but more importantly and predominantly, we have Green Deal. It changes the whole architecture within European Union. It affects many sectoral initiatives in many sectors. It's energy, it's transport, it's agriculture, it's TBTs because it's eco design and all the new requirements. It's industry, it's CBOM. So it's a completely new dimension of European policy and European relations with neighbors. And definitely it's not in the association agreement because it's completely new policy, just emerging and structuring. Ukraine also moving ahead in that, and I hope that I constantly refer to Olena, but so used to cooperate with him. Olena will say more about that, but Ukraine is very much interested in being a part or align itself with these initiatives. And that gives us the road where we have already opportunities for cooperation, not talking about membership and opportunities and challenges related to that. And one more thing, if we are talking about this economic integration and implementation of policies, it would be interesting to think about participation of Ukrainian policymakers, Ukrainian society in these cooking of European regulations, like it was for example, for Norway. It's not voting, but if we are in any case dynamically integrate with these regulations, we will have to implement that if we are interested in being a part of internal market. It would be nice to know how they are emerging and not just get them on our table for implementation. So it's one more opportunity where we can think for deeper integration. So in US, it was no taxation without representation. We should think how to formulate it similarly nicely for the case of regulatory approximation. Thank you. I will be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Veronika. That's great, and you raised a number of points, and I would like to pick for the moment on one of them, because we already have Olena Pavlenko with us, who is an energy expert and very knowledgeable on all these issues, which you also mentioned at this as examples of life, being in a constant change, which and in fact, the digitalization agenda of the European Union, and especially the Green Deal agenda of the European Union, certainly impact on the Ukrainian relations and change the ramifications of what has been designed by the existing agreements between the EU and Ukraine association agreement in the first place. So I would like to ask Olena, who unfortunately will have to leave us after her intervention because of some urgent meeting, but would like to take advantage of her being with us for 10 or 15 minutes, just to hear more on exactly on the implications of the Green Deal for Ukraine. Is it an opportunity? Is it a huge challenge? And what are the main sticking points here? And perhaps also on the wider subject of integration Ukraine's into the European Energy Union and the gas market. If you could please share with us your thoughts about the current state of affairs and future opportunities.
Thank you very much, dear Piotr. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for the opportunity to speak today. Of course, the Green Deal agenda it's a big opportunity for Ukraine. In any scenarios, this is a possibility for Ukraine to speed its reforms in energy sector. I will start probably from sector by sector overview. Yes, it will be easier and more structured maybe. So if we take the electricity sector, here we have now, of course, I think the biggest challenges, because Ukraine has to, and it declared already, to join NSOE. We expect to join NSOE in 2023. To do this, we have to show, as a part of these activities, we have to show that Ukraine can keep and work in a so-called isolated regime for some period of time, and do not rely on any electricity import from any countries. I mean Belarus and Russia. Yesterday we had a big forum on energy security, and our transmission system operator promised that Ukraine will be able to fulfill this requirement. We'll see. Another challenge in the electricity sector is, of course, coal phase out, because Ukraine, 30% of electricity generation comes from coal. I believe this is a challenge not only for Ukraine, but for many also existing EU countries. And we all now have to think how to transform our electricity sector to slowly move away from coal and replace it with other types of generation. And here, of course, we talk about hydrogen. Here we talk about renewables. Here we talk about some other new possibilities, which not only Ukraine but other EU countries can develop. We have quite a lot of attention from the EU to Ukraine when we talk about development of renewables and new types of new sources of electricity generation. Here we have one more challenge, is the investment climate, because Ukraine used to have one of the highest feed-in tariff in Europe. Then it was impossible to pay all money, all costs to our renewable investors for such, within such obligations. Now we have to review our policy towards the development of renewables, which is a challenging process, and which is a process which will demand more trust from our international partners. So quite a serious task for the existing government and for the future governments. When we talk about gas, I have to say that not only Ukraine, but Eastern Europe has less developed gas infrastructure than Western Europe has. So again, this is all task for our region, for Ukraine, and also for Poland. I hope for Slovak Republic, for Hungary, for other countries to further develop our infrastructure, to be more flexible and be able reroute the gas flows between all of us. And here we're very much thankful Poland for its attention to what's going on in Ukraine, for cooperation to fight against Nord Stream 2, and for your readiness to cooperate in terms of LNG, supply of LNG to our region and also to Ukraine. I think that would be the gas sector is one of the strategic sectors where Ukraine and Poland can develop their cooperation for the next 20, 30 years. And yes, we welcome all investors, including Poland investors, into the development of gas reserves in Ukraine. We hope this cooperation will be successful. Energy efficiency is also one of the big challenges for Ukraine, but also a big opportunity, because Ukraine is very Ukraine has 80% of residential buildings in Ukraine are built before 1991, and they consume from 40 to 70% more energy than the new one. So even if we take, for example, if we implement energy efficiency measures in our residential sector, we already will consume much less than we do it now. The same with our industry. Our industry is really very, very energy intensive, And we have to find a lot of new sources and possibilities to encourage the producers, yes, of our steel and other raw materials, which they are going to and plan to export further into the EU, how to better, how to increase their efficiency, but also how to meet the Green Deal standards. Have to, I believe, rely a lot on the EU policy and the EU will to support Ukraine and to get Ukraine to more resources, including funds, to restructure its economy, restructure its industry. I will stop here and will be happy to answer the questions if they are.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olena. Maybe one question from my side right away on yet again on the implications of the Green Deal, and because one of the ideas on the EU side which is on the table is the carbon border adjustment tax or adjustment measure. Is it already part of discussion between the EU and Ukraine, and what would that mean for Ukraine actually? Because this is I think it sounds like quite a potential stumbling block when it comes to the relations between these two partners, as it is in relations of the European Union with other partners in the world. And the second aspect is the possible cooperation on hydrogen production, because this is, of course, the ambitions of the European Union are here very high. I mean, but the EU will need to have partners, and we know that Ukraine is considered to be one of the potential partners when it comes to the development on hydrogen. But if you could perhaps say a few words. What are the prospects for that, and could that be also a green hydrogen, which some countries, at least in Europe, are very much interested in, and how do you see that?
Thank you. Regarding carbon border mechanism, yes, when this plans appeared in the EU, I have to say that many of our industry players immediately raised their attention and the attention of the government to this. I think there are already established groups within our business associations which deal particularly with this issue and are trying to propose government some solutions and negotiations, yes, arguments. The government itself do take negotiations with the European Commission. And the main argument is, I would actually agree here, that because Ukraine is part of the energy community, and the Energy Community Treaty says that Ukraine has to create with the EU a common electricity and gas market, Ukraine should not be treated as a third party. We should at least be treated as a separate, as a special partner, yes, with some special conditions. And CBAM regulation should be part of this special conditions. So moreover, Energy Community Secretariat also was part of the discussions and has proposed several scenarios how to make Ukraine part of this regulation on carbon mechanisms, carbon regulations. And CBAM was not an option, but there are other options which European Commission, European Parliament can consider. As of yesterday, if I understood our Vice Prime Minister correctly, the fight or the negotiations, let's say, still was taking on in the EU, and the group of government officials and business representatives are there to deliver the position of Ukraine. Yes, this mechanism will be too painful for Ukraine, and that's very clear for us. Regarding the hydrogen, Ukraine has developed a roadmap on hydrogen, development, sorry for this, in Ukraine. And the hydrogen strategy is under the development now. We expect to have the hydrogen strategy probably next year. And let me congratulate Poland with its strategy by 2040, really ambitious and very comprehensive plan. So we have a very good example how we can develop our strategic documents. Some of our scientific institutions already has done some assessment where the possible fields or places, regions for hydrogen development can be. This is most the southeast and also south of Ukraine, where we have access to water, where we also have access to sun and wind, so the hydrogen can be generated from renewables. We also have companies who are trying to test hydrogen transportation through distribution systems, and they already did some tests, and according to their reports, Ukrainian gas transport system, distribution transport system, not the transmission one, can transport up to 20% of hydrogen in the mix with gas. And transmission system operator is planning to present some research, some hydrogen strategy for the TSO, I believe next year. Yes, we still have some challenges, because if you transport hydrogen through the pipelines, especially gas pipelines, these pipelines should be much more better isolated than if you transport just gas, because hydrogen molecules are smaller. But yes, I would propose to wait until the TSO will present its report. And yes, we also have some small projects which already are started at the very initial stage, but are promising, and they already propose these projects to potential investors. So I can say that some movements is happening in Ukraine. Some initiatives are already taking place in Ukraine. Our transmission and distribution system operators already are testing and thinking about integration of hydrogen into the system. Whether we can export green hydrogen, still a question. I cannot say that this is 100% possible, but we do have a lot of expectations that Ukraine will play a good role in the hydrogen generation, use, and probably export to the EU.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olena. And we have now heard three very interesting and very full presentations by our Ukrainian colleagues, European also, of course, as well, European and Ukrainian. And now I would like to turn to Kai and Wojciech with a question, more kind of a strategic question, because we have seen that the level of technical cooperation, the level of economic cooperation is quite high. That we have seen progress on many fronts, but still the question in the air is basically what is the way ahead, because we hear that the European perspective for Ukraine is lacking. We hear that the EU is treating all six members of the six partners in the framework of the Eastern Partnership, maybe not equally, but kind of we have still the same framework for six partners, which couldn't be more different from each other. At least they are divided very, very clearly into those who have the association agreements and are making progress, have European ambitions, and so on, and the rest, which is definitely not there yet. So the strategic question for the EU is basically what to do. I mean, to be a little bit more provocative here, I would say, is there a middle ground between offering a full European perspective or membership perspective for Ukraine or for other countries of the Eastern Partnership who are already advanced on that way, which seems to be politically, as much as we would certainly wish for it in Poland, at least, I think very difficult. And we see it also in debate about by the Western Balkans in the EU. And on the other hand, the status quo, which is also not satisfying. So Kai, maybe if I may ask you for your reflections on that and for a possible way forward for not even for the Eastern Partnership, because perhaps we shouldn't focus so much on this particular framework, but for the relations between the most advanced countries from our Eastern neighbors and the European Union. So Kai, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piotr, and I'm very honored to take part in this Polish-Ukrainian, European-Ukrainian, EU-Ukrainian debate as someone with a Berlin perspective. I think in order to reflect about this middle ground, which I think is something we should bear in mind as the realistic objective where the EU should head for, we should think about a little bit the achievements we had or the hallmarks of EU-Ukraine relations and the Eastern Partnership. Because I think the whole set of relations of the European Union with Ukraine and with other partners has undergone at least kind of three periods. Yeah? And the first one was certainly a period of hope. Yeah, when the EU and also Ukraine in certain critical moments decided to develop new projects, new conceptual frameworks like association, like the Eastern Partnership. But I think then came sort of a moment of uncertainty when the questions of threats, also of hard security threats, the military conflict in Eastern Ukraine, the Crimea annexation and so on came into a play. And when the Eastern Partnership in a way was downgraded, or at least was marginalized in a way. And what later on came was a sort of mutual fatigue of both sides. But this is not necessarily bad, because I think what we observe since some time, and I think that also results from what we heard in the interventions of our Ukrainian friends, this fatigue has turned into realism, into pragmatism in a way. And I think if you look at the Eastern Partnership in general, but also in EU-Ukraine relations more particularly, we might state that first, this is a relationship which has a certain direction, but no destiny. This is second, I think also a relationship which is marked by a certain resilience. Resilience has become a buzzword of the Eastern Partnership, but I think in spite of all the blows on the geopolitical challenges and the destabilization measures we could witness in the last years, the European Union, for example, did not discard for example, the association approach. This could also have been imagined, and what emerged is a sort of this small steps approach based in a sort of building a solid fundament and being based on implementation. But implementationism, I think, will not be enough, because we need a sort of an offer which also can be sold in a way politically for societies, for example, for the society in Ukraine. And that's the moment where I would like to come to your question, Piotr, more precisely. In a way, we could say maybe the EU in its relations with Ukraine and Eastern neighbors should come back to the roots. to the roots of a framework which many of us still remember. That's neighborhood policy. And I think it was Dmytro who mentioned this anything but institutions formula of Prodi, which I think, if we take it seriously, is quite a far-reaching prospect. The thing is, what if there is a political will to make something out of it? But I think in the discourse about EU-Ukraine relations or Eastern Partnership, we should again kind of emphasize this principle that the EU has basically, at a very early stage, offered quite a lot in principle to neighbors. More practically, I think the EU should develop something like a European political and economic community as this middle ground prospect. And it would kind of it could rest on basically two pillars. The first one, and also this is not new, and we had allusions to that already in 2007, when in the first half Germany at that point had the presidency in the EU Council, when maybe not explicitly but de facto, the idea of creating EEA, European Economic Area, like conditions was something like a long-term objective. And I think with the achievements we have heard of in different sectors, with this partial inclusion, this kind of energy community, transport community, and other communities, this we already have. There is also already something on which the EU and Ukraine can build on. And the second element would of course be sort of a new political scaffolding, a new reinforced framework of political, foreign and security policy dialogue between the EU and some partner countries. And in this context of such a European political and economic community, it's probably the three association countries, which would be the natural partners. And Piotr, you mentioned this kind of the association trio, which kind of not de jure but de facto has emerged, and representatives of the EU like Mr. Michel and others have been kind of acknowledging this. So I think a more practical result of achieving a little bit more might be a strengthened dialogue of the EU and the trio on the prospects of cooperation. And I think a third element, apart from back to the roots and establishing a new sort of political offer, would be that might be one of an area of cooperation which might generate more traction. And that's, of course, Green Deal, as we mentioned, and digitalization. Because if these are main objectives for the EU and for the modernization of the EU, but also for the modernization of member states, we have it also in the German coalition, a treaty of the upcoming new government. There might be more acceptance in the European Union and in member states to engage in these particular very important areas. So this might be the new core of modernization in the EU-Ukraine or EU-associated countries dialogue. Yeah, maybe I will stop here just to finish with one sentence, and maybe that's the handover to Wojciech. Of course, on the part of the European Union, it's always important to have a sort of minimal to keep the Eastern Partnership on the agenda. I think Ukraine in the recent years and at the moment is on the agenda when there is a threat. So it has been much an issue of security policy and less an issue of deepening economic ties, transforming the country, supporting reforms. Of course, officially that were important objectives, but there was not really much commitment. So I think the EU needs an additional new commitment. And of course, the German-Polish relations at the moment are difficult, but irrespective of that, Germany and Poland, together with others, together with the Baltic states, together with the Nordics, together with the Visegrad group, Piotr has been involved in a promising dialogue project of Germany and the four Visegrad countries on Eastern Partnership. Germany and Poland should try to establish a new group of friends of the, maybe not the Eastern Partnership, but the associated countries, or even Ukraine, to bring a little bit more of political momentum to the whole debate. And Germany and Poland could also try to, on a bilateral or multilateral level, to buttress, to support the Eastern Partnership by their action. There is a German-Ukrainian energy partnership, a bilateral one. Maybe Poland could be included into that project, where also there is some more palpable initiatives when it comes to decarbonization, renewables, climate policies, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Yes, thank you very much, Kai. I think this is an excellent contribution, which I very much hope will be also commented on by our Ukrainian friends. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Wojciech. I mentioned that Visegrad Insights with partners has worked on Eastern Partnership and on the few scenarios for Eastern Partnership in the upcoming years. And I would like Wojciech to share with us some insights, not only from this publication, but also from the recent meeting, which took place a couple of days ago in Warsaw, to discuss these issues. And I'm sure Wojciech could also share with us a few thoughts about Poland's role in all that, because this is a Polish-Ukrainian forum, and we would also, of course, like to have some recommendations for the Polish government how to go about these issues. And before I let Wojciech speak, I just would like to remind all of you who watch us on Facebook and YouTube that you can put on Facebook, you can put your questions. So please do so, and we will try to answer them in the remaining 40 minutes of our discussion. Wojciech, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piotr, and it's really honored to be invited to the forum. Thanks, Battery Foundation. It's a privilege. On the scenarios themselves, very briefly, Visegrad Insight has been engaged in a number of regionally focused foresight exercises that was using the brain power of if you say reflection of think tankers, experts, but also influencers, journalists, people who seem to be in touch with reality but have different perspective. And in 2020, we published a report that was the result of a series of workshops we have had with colleagues from Eastern Partnership. Ukrainian Prism was one of the leading partners in this endeavor. And the report came out as a joint publication, ours and the German Marshall Fund. But indeed, Polish ministry has been also involved in preparation and funding of funding of the preparations for the report. So there's the link, and I think this is with us being often critical of the certain lines in the foreign policy. This is one of the things where you see often that that there is a room for dialogue and discussion, also with those we don't agree. The scenarios that we published in March, there are 4, and I think they can serve as a point of, as a sort of a mental map you can refer to in the discussion to try to organize the directions seen not only from Ukrainian perspective or not only from Eastern Partnership perspective, but also from the point of view of Central European partners as we gather them around the table, also from Germany and other V4 countries. Scenario number 1 that we outlined is a base scenario, but it's not the status quo scenario. We call it a pragmatic integration, assuming that Eastern Partnership delivers on, as a framework, on the promise of those who want more, get more, and move on, while the others still have an open door whenever they want to jump into the process of association and integration. With this scenario, end result, however, is what we already see the premises of in the trio format, that the Eastern Partnership would not serve at the end of the day the purpose, if that is a direction fully matured, the purpose of having one umbrella of Eastern Partnership for the 3 countries that want to be more integrated and the 3 countries that remain at the outskirts. It will be simply, if we design it from the EU perspective, unconvincible how Eastern Partnership could go on like that. So potentially successful and meeting all the objectives it has set forth, also in the 10 years perspective. It is also facing an inevitable limit of the formula. At the conference that Piotr referred 2 days ago, also that was partnered with the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of the voices, Sergei Gerasimchuk, if I might add here, was on one hand, I mean, he was quoting Game of Thrones. I will not give the exact quote, but the Game of Thrones quote, and you can imagine how perverse it could have been in the pop culture sense, was also underlying that Eastern Partnership is not considered an active format, is not being referred as a format, a framework to which Ukrainian perspective is really focused on. It is just used as with all the tools, with all the, let's say, this is not an end goal, right? To be Eastern Partnership country. And it's referred more as a project of the past, and to a large extent also perhaps unfulfilled. Second scenario that we outlined in the Eastern Partnership 2030, this was referring to the discussion about the next goals, next benchmark for EU, was Russia hegemony revisited. This title speaks for itself. In the context of this scenario, we were looking at the impact, the manifestation of Russian power, military power may have on the Eastern Partnership countries. And again, it seems that on one hand, it would be freezing, it would have a freezing effect, as it seems to have for several of the conflict zones or those embroiled much more in the conflict. But in some other countries, it only adds to the motivation to speed up and to move forward as a way of escape the legacy of the Soviet Empire and whatever dominance, the military dominance, the aggressive neighbor has. So the Russian hegemony revisited also is a scenario in which we have a strong, even stronger than we see today, looking ahead, perspective in which Eastern Partnership will not serve the purpose. Not to say that it's irrelevant, but it will not serve the purpose of containing the ambitions and maneuvering with the ambitions of the countries that are currently part of EAP. EU pivot towards Moscow. I mean, essentially that scenario, however plausible it was before Mr. Borrell's visit to Moscow, no longer is a possible scenario. So therefore, we don't need to explore it anymore. And the last one that we highlighted is the civic emancipation. And I wanted to devote just a little bit of time to underline this, because this is outside of the geopolitical narratives as we speak on one side, EU institutional frameworks. We speak also of the political ambitions of the countries. We are at the same time currently observing a phase of civic emancipation for a variety of reasons. I mean, we discussed the Euromaidan, of course. We look at Belarus, and we again see that the situation is not imaginable to continue as it is, largely because of how much people have mobilized, have a memory of mobilization on the grounds of demanding not necessarily big geopolitical goals, but better standards of living, response to COVID situation. And that was again reflected very much in the discussions we have had 2 days ago. The EU has a serious dilemma here when it comes to how it can help the countries of Eastern Partnership. On one hand, delivering the number of vaccines that are necessary. Poland is contributing here as a strong portion and building, and it's showing itself as a credible partner in delivering this human dimension security to the partners in Eastern Partnership. But at the same time, we're facing, when we look at the human dimension, a large element of disinformation and distrust or mistrust in the countries of Eastern Partnership. On one hand, therefore, as the scenario explains, we have mobilization and people are marching to the streets, but also self-organizing on a non-symbolic way, and sometimes that explodes on me. This is not to be neglected with the number and with the numbers also and the usage of internet, with the communication scaling up. And at the same time, the level of vaccination, the level of, which can be here not the absolute measurement, it's an indicator of trust in institutions, in governance, but also trust in EU as a deliverer, someone that an entity that can deliver security and deliver improvement, is not as high as you would hope and imagine, with the rates still falling behind. So in leaving these 4 scenarios and those recommendations aside, I wanted to leave the recommendations aside, except for one perhaps, which has been a strong argument from the side of the Polish initiative, even with the previous foreign minister, but on the same government, to have increased cooperation and to curate more of Eastern Partnership countries' cooperation between themselves. I mean, by now, what we have seen and we are observing has been a lot of everyone for themselves and individual approach, much less so of what we have seen in the beginnings of the Visegrad Group, when Visegrad Group has been frankly the kindergarten of the EU. It has been a training format for becoming ever, we didn't know when, member of the EU, by institutionalizing at the minimum level at least some forms of cooperation and collaboration between the countries. Polish presidency had this ambitious goal, too ambitious perhaps for a start, but let's say that also it's all about setting up certain goals of having Eastern Partnership countries organize themselves by mutual collaboration in the form of perhaps some fund, but also in terms of delegating some representation to the EU, speaking in one voice for certain areas, not all of them necessarily. And I think that remains an interesting question for the future, as I think Kai was indicating, and as we are considering whether EU will be reforming EAP, and let's not forget Western Balkans, into some new shape or the previous shape of a neighborhood policy. I think this is a large, remains a large challenge. How much of Eastern Partnership countries can actually show that they're determined to work in the European format, which is already indicating that you can do something together as a whatever purpose it serves later on. Maybe I'll leave that for a further discussion, what sort of role Visegrad can play, and positive but also negative in the current context. That I think is noteworthy and worth highlighting in the perspective of the next years to come for Eastern Partnership.
Yes, thank you very much, Wojciech. And I think I would turn now to Veronyka and to Dmytro. with the request for a reaction on what you have heard from Kai and Wojciech, because I think they raised a number of interesting points. I mean, to simplify those points a little bit for the sake of the conversation, I think so Kai presented a sort of very pragmatic, I don't know to what extent realistic, but pragmatic approach by saying, I would interpret it this way, that basically the European perspective as Ukraine would like it to have is probably under the current political circumstances in the European Union, in fact, a too ambitious goal. But what the EU could do, and this is what Kai is urging the EU to do, is to basically say we should offer a different kind of European perspective for the moment, at least, to Ukraine, which is the extension of the European economic area, kind of plus some more institutionalized forms of cooperation also in foreign policy. So that would be interesting to hear from you what you think about that. To what extent is it politically attractive, or could be, and given the current situation both within Ukraine and taking into account the sentiments and the state of affairs in the European Union. And Wojciech said that his last remark, I think, was interesting, about this. I would again simplify it into saying that, shouldn't the associated trio become a new V4? So is it maybe, wouldn't be a way to demonstrate for those countries, for three countries which are most advanced in their integration with the EU, that they are, able to cooperate with each other and give an example of a kind of maturity to be also members of the European Union, if I may put it so. So maybe Dmytro and Veronyka, if you could perhaps react to that, and be very interesting to hear your views. Thank you.
Who will start? Veronyka?
Dmytro, would you like to start?
Okay, whatever.
But could you perhaps draw your microphone closer to your mouth, because I think we don't hear you well.
And like this?
I'm not sure. I'm not hearing you well, but I don't know how about others. Maybe this is something. You don't hear it, Wojciech, either?
If I'm speaking, you don't hear me now?
Yeah, maybe if you speak a bit louder, but
Okay.
some reasons the voice is very low.
Interesting. Okay, I will try maybe to be closer to the device. Well, on the European Economic Area Light, interesting suggestion. I think this is something what I mean, in order to respond in definitely we need to have maybe more details what it is, what it consists of. But basically, I think this is the way, because we are talking about integration to the single market as much as possible. So we have already association agreement which allows for quite a lot of flexibility. So in terms of legislative framework, association agreement allows for many things. Actually, not only those explicitly mentioned there, but also to go further in many directions. So, so I think we need to explore these sort of ideas. Basically, integration to the single market is already our aim, and we can discuss more concrete ideas how to reach this aim, including those maybe institutional mechanism of participating into the legislative making of regulations, which we will then approximate to, and so on. And on Visegrad inspiration, yes, definitely. I mean, we actually, when we discuss with the European Union the trio idea, we basically explain that within the trio we have a unique opportunity to cooperate and to coordinate based on EU standards and based on our shared vision and shared direction. So we can exchange experience, and this is very practical exercise. We have association agreements, we approximate to EU standards, we have many similar challenges here. So definitely we have scope for cooperation. And at the same time, we are already in many ways integrated, because we have all this post-Soviet free trade basically among ourselves. We already have quite a free movement of people among ourselves and so on. So I think that trio definitely has the potential to become this next Visegrad. And I don't think that these 6 countries altogether can be a new Visegrad because of all the problems we know with other partners. Thank you.
Dmytro, maybe just one follow-up question, if I may, but perhaps a little bit provocative. Does the Eastern Partnership play any role in this as a format, as a concept, in all those considerations we are discussing here? Do you think is it because some of I think I don't remember if it was you or Wojciech who was referring to this kind of, no, it was Wojciech referring to a voice of a Ukrainian participant of the recent conference, that basically Eastern Partnership is a concept of the past, so that perhaps the Eastern Partnership has already delivered on what it was designed to do, and we need to move beyond that. What is your assessment of that? Do you need the Eastern Partnership?
It's a good question. Let's imagine if there's no Eastern Partnership. Just let's imagine in the next days, European Union and all the others declare there's no Eastern Partnership anymore. What will be the practical consequence? I think the biggest one will be that European Union will need to reformulate how it spends money in the region. And this is also will be a challenge for us to understand. Because now European Union financial assistance to all the countries is framed under this Eastern Partnership framework. I think this is the biggest thing here. Other aspects, as I said, on bilateral track, we are really focusing on the association agreement, and everything important is there. And on our cooperation in multilateral format, I think most important cooperation is in terms of going towards European Union is with the trio, and it is developing anyway. With Belarus, who is our direct neighbor, we have quite a big problem right now. So really good question. What is about Eastern Partnership that gives us more added value, or which could be considered as giving us more added value? I think the biggest thing in it right now is really the financial package. And we can discuss whether it is really ambitious enough, whether it really matches the needs of the country, whether it is whether there is actually differentiation in the financial packages among the countries and the volumes, and whether there is a clarity of the, I think, frankly speaking, analyzing the documents which are now discussed by the European Commission and EIS, frankly speaking, it's really difficult to understand clearly what amounts come from which source, whether these are really grants or whether they are loans, whether they are investments which needs to be attracted from some other sources. So I think more or less it is now about those sort of things, about discussing the financial assistance issues, if we talk about really substance. And all the multilateral discussions within the six, frankly speaking, is really depressive when I observe some of them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your very honest assessment of that. I think it has always been like that, that the Eastern Partnership was a useful tool, or even possibly a necessary tool for the European Union itself. I mean, to sort out its own policy towards the Eastern neighbors, and it has always been looked at much more pessimistically or critically by those neighbors and Ukraine especially. But maybe, Veronika, if I may turn to you now, and because again, coming back to this idea of sort of enlargement of the, for starters, of the European Economic Area as it's basically the integration of Ukraine or the associated trio into the single market as the offer which the European Union could put on the table. You as an expert in trade issues, in economic cooperation, what do you think about that? What would be the main obstacles? What would be the main pitfalls? What would be the main opportunities? Is it anything you think is realistic or and worthwhile, discussing in more depth and at the political level?
Yeah, thank you. It's an extremely interesting question, and yes, I think as an option, as a stage, that would be possible. I need to compare it very carefully. Like I didn't do such comparison, but basically it's what Ukraine aims to be a part of the internal market, to be a part of the single market. Not a part of the customs union, and I highlight also that the EEA is not a customs union. They have their own tariffs as well, and at the same time have the voice for like discussion of policies, but no voice in voting. And that is, as a stage, it sounds attractive. And currently, Michael Emerson has developed the proposal for like staged integration. So the quantification of more for more principle with the staged integration of these trio, association trio, and actually Balkan states as well. He's developing that now more for Balkans, with saying that similar approach can be used for Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, with integration in programs and institutions, with participation in policy debates, with maybe even some parliamentary representation, but no veto rights or initially no voting rights. I think that sounds interesting and promising, because what we have in association agreement is basically most of European Union economic regulations. It's not my assessment, it's assessment of colleagues from TAPS, that basically all key economic legislation of the European Union is embedded in the association agreement, including the Ukrainian one, which is the most ambitious agreement. So that gives a good starting point for the integration in these discussions. And I also want to, if I may, take a bit on this EAP perspective. It's just, I like the question that Dmytro posed, what would happen if we do not have it? Because bilateral path existed in any case. If we have association trio as a trio, and then we have 3 countries in the region that are outside like European discussions, that also might be a difficult situation. And if we just cancel Eastern Partnership and do not have association trio, and we bring all countries, I don't know, in some vague neighborhood, it will be even worse. So the question and thinking from the denial, if we don't have how to proceed, that would be also a good question. But association trio within Eastern Partnership, so with vague but potentially with potential for growth for the six and very specific agenda for three, which voiced readiness to move faster, deeper, sounds not that bad. But I am economist. It's my maybe I'm missing some crucial thing that you know.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Olena, you were with us again. I just also for you the question, to what extent from your perspective when it comes to the energy cooperation, and especially in this very particular moment where the European Union is embarking on a completely new path with the Green Deal and with these new projects, the climate neutrality goal, and so on and so forth. That will be a major transformation of the European Union as such. It's not just a energy transformation. That's pretty clear. To what extent do you think we need some new instruments or some new formats, new ideas when it comes to new openings to use the word from the title of our conversation here, to get this relationship between the EU and Ukraine or the Eastern Partnership countries organized in a new way. Or is it, or can we basically? Because I think many of you alluded to the fact that this is once the association agreement even was concluded, the situation was different. Now we have a transforming European Union, and how to react on that, and how to handle this relationship in this revolutionary moment where the European Union is becoming a different animal suddenly. So do you think, what is your reaction to the ideas which have been put forward during this discussion? So maybe the extension of the EAA, maybe the continuation of the Eastern Partnership project. Maybe when it comes to energy, we need something completely different.
Thank you very much. Let me divide the answer into three. First, on the official side, yes. So let's say when we talk about some documents like association agreements, I would like to say that in energy sector, we already agreed that there should be a common market. So energy sector already has been, and I believe will be, a leader in this full integration process. And I'm really very proud that me and my think tank is working in this sector, which shows a greater integration results. When we talk about like human, yes, communication and this human layer of our future, we had a conference yesterday on energy security, pretty high level, and we all very often used this word trust, and I think this word is also relevant to say answering your question. So if we want to have this deeper integration, and not only integration but deep reform of all our countries, we all should trust each other and not to afraid, yes, to integrate and extend our communication on different issues. And here energy also always was quite a good example, because we had energy community who worked as sort of translator, yes, between Ukrainian reality and the EU policy. I think this is really great example for all other sectors, and for energy sector, maybe we already are ready for even more deep communication, more deep cooperation. So I think if Ukrainian side can be part of the discussion at the level of only preparation of some decisions or discussion of some future reforms. That would be also very helpful for us, because we will be able to learn at the very first stage, at the very beginning, not only after the decision is made. So this communication layer is also important. And the third part is the funding. It will be fair to say this, although I think it's pretty common, that in Ukraine, there was a discussion a few weeks ago between us and German colleagues, and they said that Ukraine should be put in the similar conditions as other EU countries, for example, in hydrogen development. But I answered that it will not be fair, because the starting position of Ukraine and some member states, we talked about Scandinavian countries, they are not similar. So Ukraine cannot stay away, from all support, and then put this at the same conditions to develop, let's say, hydrogen or new projects or something else. If put Ukraine in the same condition, starting position as others, probably Ukraine should also have access to the funds and resources which other EU members have. That's my 3 thoughts here, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are slowly coming to the end of our discussion. We have still 15 minutes, and I would like to ask Kai to react on the responses also to his idea, but also would like you to comment also on the future of the Eastern Partnership, because I think mentioned that I believe that the Eastern Partnership is kind of necessary on the EU side for the EU to be able to focus political attention on the European East at some point, even if this is seen from the perspective of the Eastern Partnership countries as not particularly efficient and not very attractive tool. Then on the EU side, it's probably difficult to make sure that the political attention is adequately devoted to this part of Europe if we do not have such a framework. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what you suggest is something which is much more promising. Also politically, it could perhaps inject this energy I was talking about at the very beginning, so that we would have a new political project on the EU side together with Ukraine and other partners, with the association trio and so on. And this, of course, relates to the new political situation also in Germany, with the new German government in place, and the question, what is likely to happen, to what extent, what will the German Eastern new Ostpolitik number 5, 6, 7, I don't know, look like under the new traffic lights coalition. So if you could share some thoughts about that as well, that would be great.
On the Eastern Partnership, I would agree, but at the same time, to what you said, that it's in a way necessary for the European Union to bundle attention. However, this could also be replaced if we took the 3 association countries. In a way, this might be even more attractive, because there is more movement, more willingness. There's this pro-European attitude in the countries and so on. So that would it make more convenient in a way for those in the European Union who want to cooperate, because they could show that there is a sort of movement and development in the process. However, the problem, I think, is if we would kind of dismantle the Eastern Partnership, that would be on the level of political signaling a sort of decommitment of the European Union in the whole region. So when it comes, if you look at this, at the whole story through the glasses of geopolitics and strategic questions, that would mean, yes, the EU is ready to do more for some of the countries, but basically leave the others aside or do it on a bilateral, tailor-made approach. And this also entails a sort of political message in a way. So I think we would rather, we will probably go for an Eastern Partnership of variable geometry. And the Eastern Partnership might turn out to be something like the ENP, the European Neighbour Policy, which also formally still exists in a way, but it doesn't play a major role. But it had some sense for some time to enable a sort of broader consensus between the eastern and the southern so-called states of the European Union. On the energy and climate issue, I mean, there are some very kind of weak initiatives like this. It's called EU for Climate. That's a sort of, just like EU for Digitalization, that's a sort of EU Eastern Partnership countries initiative in order to assist these countries to implement the Paris Agreement objectives. But I think here we should have something much more robust, a sort of green investment fund, you know, for the countries in the neighborhood, which might also be embedded in a political debate pointing at the opportunities in terms of energy security, which goes along with greening, in terms of innovation, in terms of decentralization, for example, and so on and so forth. So I think that might be sort of green investment fund as a palpable for the Eastern neighborhood or Eastern Partnership countries. Then just some open questions, of course. Veronika and others are, of course, the experts on that field when it comes to the deepening of economic relations. If you talk about this EEA-like models, we think about the four freedoms, and some of the four freedoms are sensitive in domestic political terms. For example, free movement of labor. What would it mean? And at the same time, opening up markets goes along with adaptation costs. I mean, we know that, and it depends a little bit on the level of affluence, for example, and on the structure of your economies. We know that Norway pays for access to the single market. Switzerland also, even not being part of the EA, but having had a bilateral agreement, also pays for access. What would this arrangement mean for countries like Ukraine? And certainly Ukraine would not pay for the access to the single market, but it would pay indirectly in a way by opening up a market. But what does it mean, and which kind of financial compensation mechanisms, for example, would be needed for the adaptation, additionally to what we have on Germany? Yeah, I think there is a little bit more of goodwill and rhetoric in favor of particularly Ukraine, because we have some of the upcoming coalition parties which have been very critical about the Nord Stream 2 story, and which certainly would like to see more German engagement. But I'm cautious also in reading, for example, the coalition treaty. There was no firm commitment to a new proposal, to a new opening, to a new offer. But I read it rather as an attempt to help better implementation and to do more in the areas which are a priority from the point of view of German of the German government, i.e., climate policies and climate and energy policies, for example. Of course, when we open up the focus and talk about the strategic and security policy angle, of course, we have a tradition of détente also in this government, which will also emphasize the necessity of maintaining a sort of dialogue and even cooperation with Russia. But I think this will not, the times of giving Russia a more palpable right of co-shaping EU Eastern Partnership, German-Ukrainian relations are more or less over. Which does not mean that there will be an openness for giving new prospects for European integration or even for security-related issues when it comes to NATO. No way. But I think discussing a new offer, a new conceptual framework for interactions between EU, Ukraine, and others. Here, the difficulty will not come from a new Eastern policy, which gives privileged status to Russia, but rather from the necessity to reinforce dialogue with France. And of course, I mean, another priority we have in the coalition treaty is the establishment, or at least the perspective of a European federal state. So if you want to build a European federal state, which is difficult enough to achieve consensus among EU member states, and not all will do that, but if the EU goes and Germany wants to push for a more tightly knit European integration, opening up for any sort of prospects for neighbors and partners might be a little bit more difficult in a way. So again, the question is if Germany will not be absorbed by intra-European stuff.
Yes, thank you very much, Kai. And look, I think we are already arrived at the end of our conversation, but I would like to finish with a very brief question to all of our Ukrainian colleagues, to each of you. The question, because we tend to, at the end of such debates, we tend to look into the future and say where will we be in 5, 10, 20 years and so on. But I would like to frame this question slightly differently, in in a more pragmatic way, and ask you, what would be, from your perspective, various perspectives, a measure of a real progress in the EU-Ukrainian relations in the upcoming, not 10 years, but let's say 2 years? What would you define as a meaningful progress when it comes to the economic cooperation, when it comes to the energy cooperation, when it comes to the political institutional ties? What would you say, oh, we are, when something happens, we are now on a slightly better track than we have been so far? So if you could really, with 1-2 sentences, define such a measure of progress, that would be very interesting, I think. Maybe Dmytro, if I may start with you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, implementing association agreement. I mean, association agreement has its time. To be implemented. Basically, we have just several more years to have most of the provisions to be implemented. And if you ask about the perspective for 10 years or so, definitely association agreement should be done. And then the question comes up, what next? And that's why actually we need to explore these ideas of EAA or other more kind of full-fledged integration into the single market. And ultimately, I think the ultimate impact is decreasing the gap of development between Ukraine and Poland, because right now we have something like 4 times less GDP per capita in Ukraine than in Poland, and we had in 2004 it was 5 times less. So definitely, I'm not calling for decreasing the level of development of Poland. On the contrary, but I just would like to have Ukraine to speed up its development with the help of the EU. So ultimate impact of our economic integration and cooperation with the EU would be judged by development of the country.
Thank you. Veronyka, what are your thoughts?
Yes, basically, I fully agree with Dmytro. So, association agreement, sectoral integration, what is embedded there and what has been committed by both sides to implement should be implemented. And if my whole list of sectoral integration will be ticked, that would be great. But I have been thinking about something like a signal that EU treats Ukraine equally, and it means that EU be ready to let Ukraine in its internal market, and we have sensitive issues. So we have now one relations between Ukraine and the EU on further liberalization of tariffs, and basically it's about tariff rate quotas. We do not discuss that now, but that is only remaining the rear in terms of tariffs. So if we will see the removal of TRQs, that would be a sign that EU treats Ukraine as a part of its like internal circle. The same with CBAM, Olena will say. If it will be different treatment of association agreement countries, association free in terms of CBAM, it will mean that EU treats Ukraine not as a neighbor, but as a, like, maybe not a candidate, but somebody who has absolutely different treatment. So we have not only our regular path, but it would be interesting to follow sensitive issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronyka. So, and Olena, last word for you.
I think in energy, it's easy, you know, instead of Nord Stream 2, which is not working, we have Ukrainian gas storages and Ukrainian gas pipeline, which is part of the broader energy security system and strategic reserves. In the electricity sector, it's Ukraine, which is part of the ECFR. In all decarbonization paths, it's Ukraine, which is part of the procedures, yes, and has access to the European funds to do this decarbonization reforms in Ukraine, and no CBAM in place. I think it's pretty easy, not easy to implement, but easy to measure. But if we talk about the KPIs, yes, in a broader sense, not only in energy, I would say three things which we can take as a KPIs: capital, people, and infrastructure. Can we have more capital integration? Can we have more people who, you know, cross the border? Can we have more infrastructure projects together? That will be a good measurement of the progress. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think that was an excellent final statements by our Ukrainian colleagues, and showing the way forward. And I, of course, I'm crossing the fingers that in 2 years' time we are exactly there where you define the progress which is achievable and desirable. I think we have perhaps not focused much or not at all in this discussion on the Ukrainian-Polish relations specifically, but I think what we did discuss here in these 2 hours is extremely useful for designing a new chapter of the Polish-Ukrainian, German-Ukrainian, and EU-Ukrainian relations. And I think we will all reflect upon all those ideas in the upcoming weeks and months. So thank you very much for your participation, for your insights, for your ideas. I would like to thank on behalf of the Stefan Batory Foundation, of the Renaissance Foundation, but also of the Ukrainian Prism. I'm sorry, we was also our co-organizer, the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism is also co-organizer of this Polish-Ukrainian Forum, which with that has come to the end. Thank you very much. I wish you a very nice afternoon, and we will continue our work on the Polish-Ukrainian relations and the Ukrainian relations, of course, in the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much.
Thank you.